Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me. Welcome to this morning's EPS webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lee Ward. I'm the Managing Director of Tharstern and Nubian brands within EPS. I'm joined by my colleague Phil Dodge, who is one of EPS's industry experts. We'll be taking us through the live demonstration today. I just wanted to spend the first 10 minutes or so just setting the scene of what we're going to see in today's webinar. It actually involves us showing you two EPS software platforms, one of them being the Tharstern MIS, the second one being PrintFlow 4D, which is the automated scheduling platform. And then we worked into the demo a third-party solution, which is InSoftImp, as we touch on some ganging concepts. As I said, Phil will be running us through the live demo. We will finish off with a Q&A at the end. So in the webinar software, you will see you have the ability to ask some questions. So I'd encourage you just to ask you questions as you go along. As I say, we'll have some time at the end to stop and go through those questions. Always good for Phil and I if we get some feedback and questions. So really encourage you to ask those questions as we run through the topics. We also have a quick poll session that we'll run at the end. Just keen to get your feedback on some of the topics and concepts we're showing you today. So would massively appreciate your input on that. So without further ado, let's get into the first topic, which is the main topic of today's demonstration, which is all about automated scheduling systems. I mean, they do offer a wide range of benefits. They can significantly enhance operational performance. They can increase efficiency by optimizing the allocation of resources, ensuring that machines and personnel are utilized effectively, which reduces downtime and, of course, hopefully maximizes productivity. Really, they should also improve your accuracy by eliminating the human errors often associated with manual scheduling, giving you the tools to basically enable and precise track your management of schedules, consistently meet deadlines. These systems should provide you enhanced flexibility, allowing businesses to quickly adapt to changes in order volumes, priorities and deadlines, which is crucial for responding to customer demands and market fluctuations in today's market. Should be able to provide you better resource management, is another key advantage, as automation ensures that inventory, materials and labour are coordinated efficiently, minimising waste and reducing costs. Real-time monitoring capabilities offer visibility into job statuses, empowering managers to make informed decisions and swiftly address any issues or bottlenecks. Cost savings naturally follow, as optimised schedules and reduced errors lead to lower operational expenses. Improved customer satisfaction is achieved through more accurate and timely production schedules, helping businesses meet delivery commitments and strengthen their reputation. These systems also provide valuable data-driven insights through built-in analytics, enabling the identification of trends, process improvements, and strategic decision-making. As businesses grow, automated scheduling systems scale effortlessly to handle increased production volumes without corresponding rise in manual effort. Finally, they should support compliance and reporting by helping organisations meet industry standards and generate necessary documentation for audits and performance reviews, streamlining administration tasks. One of the other concepts that we're just touching on today, but there will be separate webinars in the EPS series to look at the MarketDirect StoreFront product in a bit more detail, but Phil is going to show some online orders that have already landed in the MIS just to show the back end workflow. So I think I won't dwell on these points, but I think you're either a business that's embraced e-commerce and has got either an off-the-shelf web-to-print system or perhaps built your own web to print system, but there are obviously some key benefits in any business trading online. So yeah, as I say, in this webinar, we're going to see how those online orders land in the MIS, and then how you can apply the efficiencies perhaps to ganging and automated scheduling once those orders hit. But as I said earlier, we'll be doing a separate webinar to look in that to look into those concepts in a bit more detail. So let's talk about potentially a smarter and more efficient way to print, one that saves money, boosts productivity, and gives your business a competitive edge. It's called ganging print jobs, which I'm sure many of you are aware of those concepts. But if not, ganging means combining multiple print projects onto a single press sheet. It's a simple idea, but the impact can be powerful if managed correctly. First, the cost savings. By sharing setup costs across multiple jobs, we can dramatically cut down expenses for paper, ink, and press time. With fewer setups, labour costs will drop too, so you get more output for less input, basically. Then there's efficiency. Automation tools, which we're going to show you today, streamline the ganging process, optimizing layouts and reducing manual work. That means faster turnaround times and the ability to meet tight deadlines with confidence. Sustainability is another big win here. By maximising the use of each press sheet, we reduce paper waste, make your operations more eco-friendly and cost-effective. Flexibility also plays a key role, whether it's booklets, labels, or a mix of formats. Ganging allows us to dynamically adjust layouts to suit different sizes and quantities. This adaptability makes it easier to manage diverse print orders without sacrificing quality or speed. And finally, the competitive edge. Lower production costs could potentially mean more competitive pricing, helping you win more business, or alternatively keeping that extra profit in-house. Faster delivery and smoother job handling lead to happier customers naturally, stronger relationships. In short, ganging print jobs isn't just a production technique, it's a strategic advantage. It can reduce costs, boost efficiency, cut waste, and can enhance your customer satisfaction. Okay, so at this point, Phil, I shall hand over to you to show us how it really does happen in the software.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to share my screen. So just bear with me 2 seconds. Just waiting for that to come up, and we should now share. And I just want you to confirm, Lee, you can definitely see my screen, yeah?
Can indeed.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, guys. So what I've done here is I've logged into the PrintFlow 4D system, which was one of the vertical apps by EPS, which links to the Tharstern application. And as you can see, the actual system itself is basically a browser-based application, which quite flexible to be seen on multiple screens. It also is installed into an SQL platform, which basically means you can extract that data for reporting purposes. And you can see that over here, we've got the ability to actually log into the actual system. That can actually have user privileges to determine what we can and can't do within the system. And I also want to point out as well, there's the ability in here to actually look at specific sites as well. So you could, if you wanted to, if you're a large group consisting of multiple production facilities, you could elect to actually look at separate sites. Having said that, you can see that we have a whole bunch of resources here running from top to bottom. So if I just scroll down here, you can see there's a whole bunch of resources that I've got set up in here. And you'll notice that this little arrow allows me to actually close or expand these areas. So if you wanted to, you could see every single resource in your facility or your group, but only actually concentrate temporarily on the resources that are associated to your specific site, for instance. Now going from left to right, it's got a conventional Gantt chart here where we can actually change the actual resolution of what we're actually seeing from, ironically, 1 minute all the way up to 6 months. But you can see that by choosing one of these options, what we actually see then is the information that's being presented to us. And you can see that the weekends are actually specified here, basically, as you can see here with obviously the red color, and the weekdays obviously in blue. But we can actually elect to actually change which view of the actual data we want to go to. So for example, here, I'm going to a 2-day stream, and I can see all the details here. So as you can see, all of the little time blocks here, which are referred to as tasks, or basically job parts as you would understand it in Tharstern, they are actually detailed as little rectangular blocks, like you see just in conventional Tharstern system. And those time blocks are obviously being created from the job, and therefore the estimated time that's actually being submitted to PrintFlow 4D. But as you can see, as we look down here, there is a color map or a heat map indicating if those tasks are on time or they're becoming late. Okay, so we have a visualization of that. And as you can see here, there's also shut periods to represent basically areas of non-productivity, which we can change on the fly should we need to do so. You can, of course, if you wanted to change these colors, that's quite straightforward to do. There's a setting to actually go through that. And if, like me, you'll find yourself finding it difficult to see these days because you're getting more short-sighted, you can see that I can actually increase the actual blocks themselves so that we can actually see more information. Or if you wanted to, you could actually just turn it back to the 100% so that you actually have the standard view, but I could make it even smaller. And as we would say normally when utilizing the Gantt charts, probably your best bet is to actually have 2 or more 4K monitors to actually visualize all the job parts that are actually appearing on the actual schedule. Okay, so those are some of the basics. You can see the timeline here, the red timeline. That sadly in every environment relentlessly moves from left to right, showing you if you're behind schedule or not. So just a couple of other little points before I actually carry on. If you need to actually do some reconfiguration of the actual time blocks, you can look at an individual form rather than the individual job. You can initiate custom colors if you wish to do so. And in addition to that, you can show any completed tasks if you wish to do so. But the other things that we're able to actually do is we go into this cost center attributes as well, is that we can actually change the actual sequence of operations or inside this actual list. So we could change the actual sequencing here if we needed to do so. In addition to that, I'll just close that little window there. What we are also able to do is to see the information that we want to publish in the tooltip that you saw coming up. So you can see there's a whole bunch of attributes in here, which I can elect to actually select and actually push into this right-hand panel so that when I actually go over a particular task, obviously we see the important information that we need to see if we're actually a scheduler. In addition to all of that as well, you can see material warnings as well by clicking into these areas to tell you, where you've got problems with the materials. I also want to concentrate on a couple of other little points as well, in that you can conventionally move a time block to a particular location and actually put it into an area there. You do have options here as well to allow you to actually split tasks, and a number of you will obviously want to pin a particular task to a time point. And that would conventionally be for things like press passes where you've got people coming in and you need to specifically anchor that particular task to that particular date point. But what I want to point out to you from the get-go is that moving the actual tasks or job parts inside the Gantt chart is not the normal way for this system to actually function. As we'll see a little later on, it's a rules-based scheduling system to work basically on the specific rules that you've actually programmed into the system. So anyway, enough on the actual Gantt chart. I also want to point out to you that you can actually look at the entire list of jobs by going into a job view here. You can see that each of these columns here that we can actually add or remove allows us to actually filter the data, but you can actually see above this we have a series of lozenges to actually look at key information. So it's very easy for us to actually look at the specific jobs that are late. We can even look at jobs that are predicted to be late. We can look at the ones that are started. And as I said before, when we look at a specific lozenge, if you needed to actually find a specific piece of information, say a job number or something else, as I start, putting the actual data in here, what it will actually do is it will actually find whatever occurrence of that information it can find. Okay, so what I'll do probably just to make it a bit clearer to you there, we'll get these items up here. And as you can see, if I did something like this, for instance, it's going to find obviously that specified job within inside the actual list. So hopefully you can see that that's quite an easy system to actually look at that data. You can eliminate filters, and you can actually elect to delete jobs off if you needed to do so. Now we can also go down to a task level, an individual operational level, where we can actually see what's going on. And if I just go back here, for example, because it's remembered that particular filter, we take those filters off. We get all of the actual jobs coming up, and when we come into the individual tasks as well, we can start to actually look for all of these items. In fact, let me just get rid of that one there. And you'll notice we also have some circular dots here which indicate whether that specific task can actually run now. And you'll notice that this one's red here because this is a general finishing task, and it's probably dependent upon the preceding tasks to actually be done before this can actually be activated. And bearing in mind that you might even be actually filtering by task descriptions as well, and you can create your own filters accordingly. So that's all the straightforward elements to basically the visual look and feel of the actual system. We will come through and look at some other more key ones in a second. But of course, it's about the submission of jobs, obviously, into the PrintFlow 4D environment. So for this, as you can see, I'm going back into Tharstern. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to look at this particular job here, which is a simple poster job. And obviously I can actually put a required by date and a time associated to this. But what is absolutely critical to this entire process is going to be the specific milestones that you elect to actually utilize. And the reason, basically for this is because the milestones can create basically constraints on when we can actually produce the specified job. So ironically, and just for the purpose of this demonstration, we need it for the 20th, but I'm just actually going to specify, ironically, that the materials are not due until the 30th, okay? Just for the specifics of doing this demonstration. So the key question is, well, how do we do a submission basically to PrintFlow 4D? Well, there are a number of different ways. You can actually go through a submission process and hit the eFlow option here. And eFlow is basically a bidirectional communication bus that's used with all the EPS applications to send and return information. Or what you can actually do is you can actually decide to actually set the job as production ready. And some of you will already know that you might even want to actually specify that a job is immediately production ready when you basically save that job. And what you can see is there is an eFlow status that takes place. And what this will do is we'll get an acknowledgement indicating that the job has actually been submitted through basically to the PrintFlow 4D system. And if we come into PrintFlow 4D, by default, what that means is that that job will reside, once we do a little scan here, inside basically the to-do list. And it can take a couple of seconds for this to actually take place, but we'll just wait for it to finish there. And if I come in here, you can see that I've actually got that job now residing in the to-do list. Now, I just want to point out a couple of other things. When we're in this list, if we want to do the manual submission, you'll notice that it then shows all the individual parts. I do have the ability in here to show a PERT chart. And this is basically just indicating the various component parts from pre-press to the actual press operations to the actual finishing, how this thing is actually constructed. And the reason this actually exists is because it's theoretically possible that you may not even have a physical job bag. So you might want to know what this job actually consists of. Okay, the other things that we can actually see in here are basically the job details. And again, this breaks down the job into its component parts so that we can look at it. We even have the ability to look at properties in here. And this is literally every single property that the Tharstern job has actually submitted. And this is very important because later on, as we'll see, these can be used basically to actually create rules to determine how things are actually scheduled. But we can, if we wanted to, look at this information. Now, in terms of scheduling this onto the board, you can basically click on this and you can elect to actually schedule it straight onto the board, or what you can actually do is you can hit this optimization button. Both will do the same thing. And basically, in this particular case, everything in the to-do list, when I hit the optimization, is basically thrown onto the production scheduling board, and then an optimization process is executed based upon the rules that you may actually create to sequence the jobs in the best sequence for your business. And just to prove that point, I guess if we come to the actual timeline here and we go to the 30th, it'll take us to that location, and you can see that we've actually got that specified job that I've just submitted coming into here. So first thing to note, it's in red because it's going to be late, which we know because I had obviously put the date in for, I think, the end of this week. But secondly, the system has complied with the milestone rule, which saying is the material's not coming in basically until the 30th at 0900 hours. Okay, so I just wanted you to point that out. You can also see, as we've briefly seen before, when I've put my cursor over the actual job part or task, what that does is that then shows basically the downstream and upstream tasks with these arrows. So obviously, if I was to release this milestone, then the PrintFlow 4D system will then optimize, and this job, based on its due date, could obviously have been placed further left on the actual Gantt chart. Okay, so anyway, what we'll do is we'll go back to today, and what we can actually see are basically all those jobs that are actually listed in the system. As you would normally do, probably in the Tharstern system, we are going to save and publish or commit this particular schedule based upon the rules that have been executed. And what that basically means is that the data that's being supplied back from PrintFlow 4D to Tharstern is basically going to allow us to publish a work to list basically in the shop floor data collection system, in this case IDC. So you can see that I can actually come into this particular IDC and I can actually select myself from the actual list. You can see that I'm on the straight number 1 and I can start the operation. And as you'd expect, it's showing me all the things I could do. But if I click the current resource, what it's actually doing is it's reading, obviously, those job and job parts from left to right. So all the kind of standard stuff, we can select this and then we can actually begin the process of actually executing a run operation against this particular job or job part. And what that will do is that when we actually see the actual little scan here, what it will do is it will basically update the system, and in a couple of seconds, it might take a couple more seconds, what will actually happen is that our operation will basically steam forward. So we'll leave it for a couple more seconds to actually do that. But the idea is that we have actually shown you so far what you would see normally with inside the Tharstern system. But this is at the point where everything changes completely. Because in Tharstern, you would be actually taking stuff from the unplanned list, a bit like the to-do list, and you would be physically planning it onto the actual production scheduling board. PrintFlow 4D is a rules-based system. So it basically relies on rules in order to actually position these items into the correct locations. And what we're going to do is we're going to investigate what we can do with some of these things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into this particular device here, because one thing you've probably noticed is all of these job and job parts have been distributed across multiple devices. And there's a reason for this. If we come into this particular cost center, which is the straight number 1, we can see that basically it has the normal kind of data that you would see from Tharstern, but they're down in the bottom left-hand corner, there is something called a group. And we're just going to open the group up. And what we can actually see is that the group can actually have specific members. So we can see that all of these presses have been assigned to this particular group. And what that means is the system is capable of load balancing. So when I initially loaded all these jobs at the very beginning of the situation, what happened is they actually automatically distributed across these devices without me having to move from a single device. Say, let's say it loaded directly onto the XL105 by default. I didn't have to move a job part onto the perfecting 1, 2, 3, or 4. It basically automatically loaded those straight across those devices. And that's because of this group behavior. Okay. And what you'll also notice is that there are some other attributes associated with it called adaptive scoring. And the adaptive scoring is in order to actually determine which job parts or tasks should be placed on those resources in which particular sequences. And what we're able to do here, as you can see, is against each of these attributes, change properties that will affect how that system works. But in a nutshell, what we're doing here is we are getting to a situation that when we hit that optimization button, based upon these adaptive scoring values that are going to be generated and limitation rules, which I'll talk about, and switchover rules, each one of the tasks or job parts is going to be given a numerical value. And essentially, the highest numerical value wins and takes precedence against that specific device. And what I'm just pointing out here is that you can actually change these things by changing the sliders. You can also add properties that Tharstern has actually submitted through to PrintFlow 4D. So if you wanted to, you could start to actually look at a property of, say, the CSR. And we've gone to facilities where if the CSR happens to be the managing director, then this job will take precedence over all other jobs. And that might be a rule that is executed in some facilities. But what I want to point out as well is if we look at the actual sequence here, what we can do against all of these job parts is we can, just for the purposes of the groups of the items here, we can basically start to say, well, actually, at the moment, there is a preference for urgent jobs. It's very low. We haven't got a high preference to that. There is actually a bigger preference for us to reduce switchovers. And obviously a switchover is basically the reconfiguration of a device, which on the actual schedule is represented by a little brown bar. You can see that there down in the left-hand corner, it's got a brown color for switchover. But I could completely change these rules. So I now have a preference for urgent jobs over switchovers. That takes precedence. So I don't care if I have to reconfigure devices, I need to do that. Now, having done that, what I can do is if we look at that schedule there, if I actually hit the optimization process, it's going to execute those rules. And what we'll actually see is that the job parts, I hope you all saw that, but they changed sequence because effectively each one of those job parts or tasks was now given a different value based upon the fact that we had decided to actually put preferencing of urgent jobs over basically reduction of switchovers. Now, that is only one small thing that we can actually do. Another thing that we could do is against an individual resource cost center, one of better terms, we can also place limitation rules because a printing device or a finishing device is possibly capable of doing lots of things, okay? But we may want to actually reduce its capacity or capabilities for some very distinct reasons. So you can see that in this particular case, we have a limitation rule, which is saying on this device, I only want sheet work and work and turn operations to actually appear. And just to point out that it is actually doing this, we can see that as I put my cursor over here, you can see under the pop-up there, the task description is saying sheet work. And you can see that this is saying sheet work and sheet work. And you'll notice that there's spare space between all of these things. And there are other jobs here that have got the word perfecting against them, but they are not appearing on that device. And that's because we've put a limitation rule against that. Now, I just want to point out how these rules are actually built. And this becomes the core part of PrintFlow 4D, whether it's a limitation rule or a switchover rule, which I'll come back to in a second, is the fact that you can actually come in here and actually build like basically an algorithm or basically a formula to determine what should happen. And you can see that there's a whole bunch of functions in here that you can actually utilize. So they could be things like task properties. You can see that you've got things like what is the back color, okay? The front color, number 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we're saying is you might say, well, for example, I might want on this device for in terms of the most appropriate methodology in my business that I want all jobs that are sheet work or work and turn on a specific material type, yeah, which are printed in say 4-color process, or which basically are printed in Pantones or other very distinct custom rules to your business. And we've just created a very simplistic rule here just to show you that point. And you'll notice that you can also then hit a validation process, which is just making sure that you haven't created a rule that conflicts with itself, but also you can test it to identify how many of the tasks or job parts within the current schedule meet that particular classification, and then we can actually confirm that rule. Okay, so we're able to actually build those rules, which have also, although we use the adaptive scoring technique for the group of devices, these limitation rules then take precedence on that as well. And that's why you haven't seen basically the straight number one actually have very many jobs associated to it. But what I can do is I can come in here, because I've seen that there's a lot of jobs there, and I might elect, for instance, to unenable that rule. So take that restriction off. Now, once I've taken the restriction off, all I have to do in this particular case is I have to actually just save the system quickly, and then I come out of the system like so. I just log back in. Okay, so we can actually see the schedule as it is. Brings it back up there, and you'll notice that nothing has apparently happened. But when I hit the optimization process, it goes through and does the calculations. It might take a couple of seconds for it to kick in. And you can see that now the perfecting jobs are no longer being eliminated from the straight number one. And I've basically allowed the system to increase the capacity against those resources. I could, if I wanted to as well, start to come in here and delete shunts. And it could be against multiple devices if I wanted to do so. So I can come in here and delete these. And if you consider how long it may take to actually reschedule all of those elements in Tharstern, well, in PrintFlow 4D, I just hit the optimization process. And what this is basically going to do is it's going to do all those calculations and bring those jobs forward. Now, there could be some situations, as you can see here, where it can't be brought forward because obviously it's dependent, obviously, on the plate making process. But again, I could elect to actually get rid of the overtime associated to that department. And there's also another way of actually dealing with this process by going through and doing scenarios. But what we're trying actually just illustrating to you here is it's a lot faster to actually execute those particular rules once you've actually built them into the system. And these can be related to obviously all sorts of other devices. So for instance, you can see that down here on the folding, we can see that the individual tasks themselves have got different colors. And the reason for that is because when I actually come into this particular cost center like so, what we've actually got is a switchover rule being kicked in. And this is basically saying where the folding catalog of the task to actually be located just after the current task, if the folding catalog designation is different. So in other words, let's say our first task is an F16-1 fold, and the system looks to put an F4-1 or a 4-page fold immediately after it, it will actually incur a 30-minute time penalty because that is a reconfiguration of the device. And so what that basically means is when we start looking down here, you can see that there is a brown area of 30 minutes to initially get it into, if I put my cursor over there, a 4-page fold, but it's actually turned out to be economical to actually then put the 16-page fold, which has incurred that 30-minute switchover, as you can see, but then it's associated all of the similar type of 16-page folds going all the way across it until it becomes economical for us to do a switchover. So we can basically effectively talk, or you could talk to your operators inside your facility to identify the optimal methodology for running each individual device in your facility. And if you take those rules and obviously look at it from a helicopter view as well, you can build those rules into the system so that the system can basically schedule for you the actual tasks or job parts into the schedule automatically without you having to do any manual movement of tasks. So I think it's quite a powerful system for us able to actually get to a point where we can do that, and we can do it literally just by pressing the optimization button. And I also want to point out one other thing as well, or in fact, two quite critical elements. We are able to freeze a specific zone. And the reason why this is built into the system is if you take fast moving operations, such as digital operations, while it might be amusing to watch somebody running around like a madman trying to bring a pallet or a reel of paper to a device, only for them to find out that the work to list has just suddenly changed, it's not very practical. So the idea is being able to freeze a specific time period so that that material can actually be brought closer to the device, and there's a bit of stability taking place, even though it's a fast-moving environment. Secondly, we may be in a situation where you saw me playing around with the adaptive scoring, where an experienced scheduler, because a scheduler could still use this application, might play around with some of the rules every now and then. But when they go on holiday and someone takes over, a less experienced individual who may not know the system as well has to actually follow a particular strategy. And it might be that Lee says to me, if I'm a less experienced person, there might be a strategy that's in there called in time, in full delivery, rather than make the actual schedule efficient for the facility at the expense of one or two customers. So that's where these strategies can actually be quite cool. And literally by pressing that optimization button, each one of the tasks or job parts is given a numerical value and then resequenced dynamically inside the actual schedule. And then all you need to do is to turn around and save and publish to get it onto the shop floor data collection system. However, you could go to a fully automated system if you wish to do so, because you can see that there is basically an automatic scheduling configuration capability. And what this is about is, and you can see I've already created one of these because you can actually have multiple rules if you wished, is where it's basically saying every 15-minute interval, what I want you to do is I want you to optimize, in this case, every single one of these plants, okay, providing we are operational between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Okay, you can also define a strategy you want it to actually execute, and then basically publish this schedule automatically. So that means that based upon the feedback that you're getting from obviously the shop floor, every 15 minutes, this entire schedule could be reorientated to be the most efficient based upon the rule sets that you've set against the devices. And I think where this comes into play is where when things go southbound, usually where a device fails and you have to actually increase the shut period, or for instance, as you can see up here, I've got myself as an operator who's limited against a specific device. If you basically increase the shuts or indicate that the individual's not available, or you have situations where a press fails for you and therefore you have to actually classify it as a shut, that is a highly stressful situation where people are demanding a work to list, i.e. what do I do next? And at the moment within Tharstern, you'd have to probably shuffle some time blocks very quickly or make a snap decision. Whereas here, you'd hit that optimization button and basically the entire schedule would actually resequence itself. So that's where that, I think, particularly comes into play, so that your scheduler can actually submit basically those work to lists automatically, but also they may have to actually deal with the practical realities of actually making sure that device is now operational by calling the various vendors or subcontractors. So the other things I just wanted to show you as well is, while that is actually doing the load balancing and following and executing your rules, you also have the ability to look at something called a schedule summary. Now, obviously, we're not running a commercially viable business here, so that's why a lot of our jobs are going to be late. But the point is, we can see what's started, not started, and complete. And what's really important is that down here, we can start to see the number of hours that are being lost as a result of a switchover or a reconfiguration of a print or finishing device. We can also see over here the on-time versus late deliveries, okay? And we can also see at the bottom here the cost centers or devices which have the most switchover time or reconfiguration time. And these are called basically weak links, and we can look at this. And it may be that what the scheduler spends a lot of time doing is actually looking at how we can actually reduce that lost reconfiguration time. Is there any strategy to actually reduce that? Because that might be a metric that we're actually looking at. Now, also associated to all this, I guess we need to look at the cost center utilization. So we have some straightforward metrics here that we can actually look at. You can see that I have the ability to just look at specific departments if I wanted to do so, or I could actually look at specific individual devices, or as you've seen here before, I can actually look at absolutely every single one of the items concerned. We have the ability to actually show additional details here. So, what's available, what's been a switchover, what's set up, what's run, and what's been a shut, so that we can start to look at what are the most productive resources within inside the actual facility over a period of time. And of course, there's the ability, obviously, to download this particular data to be presented in reports. And we can start to look at specific timeframes, daily, weekly, monthly. So it has some integrated reporting inside the actual system. Bearing in mind as well, because it's a SQL-based product, there's no reason why your own reports couldn't actually be built with an associated reporting tool. I guess Crystal could be done that with an ODBC connection. But the point is that we're able to actually see a lot of this data within inside the system. So that's kind of the reporting area. I just thought, quickly what we'd actually look at is going back to Tharstern and looking at some of the other opportunities that we can actually deal with. And you can see here that what we've actually got is we've got like a leaflet that we're saying that's come from MDSF or MarketDirect StoreFront, or it could be coming from another storefront solution. You've got basically a bunch here of other leaflets. In this particular case, we can see that there are some milestones. It's been pass or press internally. Why is that important? Well, I guess because while these jobs actually exist here, you can see that if we go into the ganging pool, which in Tharstern is literally a pool of all jobs that are ready to potentially go, you've got the ability basically to see here everything that's pass or press, and you could then start to actually select jobs with like type materials. And in this case, I've just created filters for those. So what we're able to do is to actually create basically a project. Okay, and it could be in this particular case, Lee's project. So we're looking basically to get production efficiencies by combining these items rather than being separate jobs. Could we actually create, a production job? And there may be different product types for doing this, or it may be that actually in your facility there is just a single product type. And what we can do is that we can actually either review this or we can just process this to create a production job. So if I just do the review, what's happening in this particular case is that these 3 separate jobs are being submitted basically to a integration called InSoftImp to look for integration efficiencies and savings. And you can see that it's brought the individual 3 parts in. And when we actually look at the actual plan it's come up with, it's looking basically, if I just move this over a little bit, it's looking to basically combine these 3 products onto one print lay and go onto an Excel 105. We can also see the overproduction versus the original quantities, and we can basically just confirm that and accept the project. This does a number of different things. Firstly, it removes those 3 jobs from the ganging pool because we wouldn't want to process those again. And secondly, what it does is it generates something called a production job, which obviously appears inside the actual Tharstern system and is being generated now, which understands the materials up until about the cutting or creasing stage, at which point the original jobs submissions in terms of their post-cutting operations will come into play. So you can see it's been removed there. And if we actually look back into the job list, you can see that Lee's project actually exists there, and we're able again to actually turn around and actually, if we wanted to make it production ready, to submit this basically to the actual system. And that can be a very powerful thing to do. Please bear in mind that I haven't actually set the production ready filter on as default, but that could be what you'd actually do in the real world. So basically, you may not even review the project. It might actually just convert into basically a production job and then actually appear on the actual production schedule. So you can see that when we come back into PrintFlow 4D and into the Gantt chart, it will actually appear inside the to-do list. Once we do a little scan here, you can see the items coming in, and it will actually reside basically in here. Okay, and that could actually be manually loaded to the system, or, and I'm just going to cheat here by copying that job number there, or what it could actually do is just by hitting the optimization button, that could actually load from the to-do list directly onto the schedule. And what that means then, it's been automatically scheduled. I can just put the actual job number in there, and then we can actually find that gang. You can see it comes up with all the listing of the items, and it's now residing as a ganged operation to its subsequent component parts of the production gang, and then obviously to the individual jobs themselves, just like it does currently within the Tharstern system. So what I hope you've actually seen from this is that we've shown you the basic stuff that you would normally get with Tharstern, but also what we've actually shown you is that we can set up PrintFlow 4D with a rules-based system for basically automating your scheduling. And if you really want to go the full hog, you can actually just enable that to be fully automated if you wish to do so. And that's kind of really the end of the demonstration. And if I just hand over to Lee, we've got some polls and some questions.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
So hopefully we'll be able to launch the poll now. A number of questions. So what do you currently use to schedule your production? Tharstern production scheduling, MIS non-Tharstern production scheduling module, manual T cards, or Excel? Always good to see good participation, Phil, isn't it?
It is indeed. Thank you, guys.
Still votes coming in. I'll share the votes so it's interesting for the audience to see the kind of stats we're getting. Okay, still coming in. 65% of you voted, so let's share those. So most of you using Tharstern scheduling, 9% using your current MI scheduling, 21% T cards, and 26% good old Excel. Never fails. Okay. What's your opinion of ganging? We currently do gang, but recognise we could improve our work. We currently don't gang, but it would like to consider it. We do gang and are happy with how we manage the process. We don't consider ganging would be a benefit to us. Sorry, it would help if I launched the poll, wouldn't it? I think this was going to be interesting for me to see what the general opinion was, Phil. Okay, still votes coming in.
Yeah. I guess the follow-up question we should have said as well with that is it because you would consider you doing the game more difficult?
Sorry, you broke up a bit there. I didn't catch all of that.
I was just saying that perhaps people might not consider doing the ganging because it makes scheduling more difficult. Whereas if you have a rules-based or automated scheduling system, that opens potentially those opportunities up.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so good participation again. Share the results there. So it's interesting. It's kind of 39% of the audience do gang, but recognise they can improve. 39% don't gang. We do gang and are happy with how we manage the process, 11%. And then 11% don't consider ganging would be a benefit. Not surprised, it's not right for everybody's business, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Two more questions, guys. Which resources in the facility do you schedule? Just non-digital, both digital and non-digital, printing and finishing resources, printing. Oh, got that in twice. I have to merge those percentages.
Yeah. I was particularly interested with the second one as well, whether it was both digital and non-digital. Because obviously digital devices, because it's fast turnaround, again,
Right.
sometimes it can be a challenge.
Yeah, if you're not in an automated environment, it's a lot of legwork, right?
Yeah. And I'd
So
like to think that PrintFlow 4D gives the opportunity for those type of things to be scheduled efficiently.
100%. 100%. Okay. So final question. If you don't schedule all resources, why? It'll be an interesting one to hear the feedback of, or see the feedback of. We've got some questions coming in as well, Phil, so
Okay.
we'll get onto those next. Okay. And share results. A small plant, so 16% don't need it. We have complex rules that are hard to replicate in the software. That would be interesting. That would be interesting to understand what those are actually. 28% of you are there, and then 56% takes too long to schedule in real time. Okie doke.
Which is a challenge.
Indeed. So appreciate your feedback there, guys. Thanks very much for your participation. We do have some questions that have piled in. Mark kicked us off with a great question, actually, Phil. Could we schedule by operator's skill set? Example would be if we have 4 machines but only 3 operators, and not all operators can run all machines. I should add, we can schedule all 4 machines with 3 operators, with the qualified operators being shared across machines during their shift. Great question.
Yeah, and I probably didn't make this completely clear, but the answer is yes, because what you can do is you can actually have individuals inside the system with skill sets for specific machines. So in this particular case, you can see, and I am actually tied to 10,000. So if I didn't turn up, effectively, if there's no other facility that have got that skill set, effectively that 10,000 will be scheduled there. Okay, so yes, you can do that. There is a feature where you can actually schedule based upon individual and also including pooling as well. So yes, a great question.
Great question. Thank you, Mark. Emma has asked, sometimes when we adjust a job across to a new cost center, we complete off a folding task because we are moving it to a finishing unit, which folds and binding together. Can the rules do this as well as move between? I can't see the rest of the question. Can the rules do this as well as move between optimized cost centers?
I think that's a fantastic question because it's almost like changing the method of manufacture. So I tell you what, if we take that one offline, because we can to a limited extent change stuff, but I just want to check up on that one. So let's park that one, Lee, and I can actually respond to Emma on that because I guess that's going, from let's say a situation where might be printing and folding to going digitally and potentially just doing that all in line. So I'll need to actually check that out because there is some capability to do that, but you can imagine that if you are changing the method of manufacture, that's usually you have to send that back to the MIS, change sequence of events.
Yeah,
But let me take that one down. That was a great question, by the way.
that is a great question. Thanks, Emma. Okay, we've got another question here. I need to schedule over 60 digital jobs per day on one device. Is this possible to do completely automated?
Well, I would say if you've got the rules set up, yeah, and you've actually got the automatic scheduling configuration, okay, so it's running every 15 minutes or whatever it is, then it could be, because what's going to happen, and as long as the jobs go into the to-do list at every 15-minute interval, they're going to be taken off and placed onto the schedule, which will go against whichever digital devices, and then the optimization is going to kick in. So
Yeah.
I can't see why that couldn't be done, basically. Now, the one thing
As you said earlier, you'd want to freeze it so that if you're booking jobs in rapidly, you don't want the thing moving around every sort of 5 or 10 minutes. So you probably want to set
correct,
a sensible freezing
yes.
period, I guess. Okay, any more questions? No, looks like we're done with questions.
Brilliant.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Let me just share my screen for one final time. So if you need more information, head to the EPS website and you can browse to the product listings that you've seen today, PrintFlow 4D or Tharstern MIS. Feel free to reach out to either myself with my email address there or Phil. We'd be happy to help you further. Thank you for
Can I
joining us
just
today.
butt in there for a second, Lee? The email address for me is Philip, that's PHILIP .dodge at EPS sw.com. Just thought I'd mention that, guys, because otherwise you'll send me emails and I just won't be able to respond because I won't receive them, basically. So just
Okie doke. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time. I hope you found it interesting and look forward to seeing you on a future webinar.
take care.